Okay, in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the math, or doing some basic math in Java. Specifically, our goal is to get towards integer division, but we may end up saving that for another video because first we're going to talk a little bit about return methods, right? So our goal here is kind of twofold: talk about basic math while also talking about return methods. So we've written a lot of, a fair amount of methods so far. They've all had void as the return type, right? So that means that nothing is being sent back. So we're going to create a slightly different example this time where something's going to be sent back. So you'll notice that I've created two classes, MathFun and MathRunner. Right, MathFun and MathRunner. So go, and these are empty classes. That's why I have these little these errors here right now because I deleted everything that was in there. So let's do this. Let's start off by opening up MathFun and creating that. So go ahead and create that now. And I'm going to add in the basic stuff that we know of, right? So we have to declare declare and initialize our class. So public class, this is called MathFun. Okay. And I'm going to skip over putting a constructor in this one because this class is going to be a little bit different. We're only going to put methods in this class to kind of demonstrate our ideas. So we don't really need a constructor because we're not going to have any variables that are storing anything in here. So I'm going to jump right into writing the very first method that we're going to have. So we are used to doing things like this. So you may want to wait for a second to type this out yourself. But so let's say we created this method, public void sum, and I had two numbers coming in, num1 and num2. Right? So we've done methods that look similar to this before. And then let's say I did something in this method like system.out.println, and we said num1 plus num2. Right? We've done things that are similar to that. The result here is going to be that the console is going to display the sum of these two numbers. Right? So totally can do that. That's one method of showing this information on the screen. But what would be nice is if we can create methods that are a little bit more flexible for us. So to make it a little bit more flexible, I may not want to print on the screen. Sometimes I may want to just store that information in another variable. So it's not always useful to print something. It's often useful to send that information back. For instance, let's say I sent one of you guys to the office, right, with a note that had some information for the office, and they wrote a note back, right? The method would be you going and doing something with that note, right, bringing it to the office, and then the return would be the item that comes back to me. I may print that item by putting it on the board. I may say it. I may just keep that information to myself, right? If I print it, right, that's a very defining way to do it. So we're going to do something a little bit different here. First and foremost, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to delete this word void, and instead of the word void, I'm going to put int. Okay, so public int sum, and what that means is we have int as an integer, so that's the data type that's going to be returned. I could write a method that said double. I could write a method that said boolean if I wanted to return true and false. I could do floats. I could do whatever else I want. I could do a string if I want to send back a string. Lots and lots of different things that I could use. I could put there instead. So I'm going to go back and change that and say int. And so the difference here that we're going to notice is I'm not going to print. I don't want this to end up on the console screen. I want this to just go back to the location, right? Which we may end up printing, but we don't have to then. So that gives us this flexibility that I'm talking about. So every time I have int here, you'll notice if I compile this right now, my error is going to say missing return statement. That's because every method that's not a void method is a return method, which means somewhere for every case I have to return some information, right? I could return 0, which would mean I'm always just going to send back the number 0. I could return some other specific number, or I can return. In this case, I'm gonna do a little algebra. I'm going to say num1 plus num2, right? So what this is saying is, okay, return this sum right here. Figure out the sum and then send it back, right? Which, like I said, we may print, we may not. Lots of different things we could do with that. So go ahead and compile, make sure that there's no syntax errors. Looks good. And now let's go over to our math runner. And I got to put in the usual things here. This is public class, math runner. And we need a main method here to run this thing with. Public static void main string args. Okay, nice. So as you should recall, maybe pause this and think about the next line that you're going to type. Okay, so we're going to type in, we need to create an object, right? An object of that math fun class that we created, right? So I'm going to say math fun, and I'm going to call this calc object, because we're going to do some calculations with it. So calc object equals new math fun. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I've created this object. We only have one method to it. And I'm going to play around with a couple of things with this. So what I could do is we have this method, right? We have this, so I could say calc object.sum, and let's say we add the numbers 2 and 3. Right? So right now this would run. This would completely run. I can compile it and we see no errors. But it's not a very useful program at this point because it's going to calculate the sum, but the idea is that this spot, when we call this method, 2 and 3 will be sent out to the method sum, and coming back will be a number, right? The number 5. So in this spot will be the number 5. Well, we didn't tell it to do anything with the number 5, so the 5 would get here and then we'd be done, right? So what I can do now is I can wrap that around something. Well, let's do it this way. I'm going to create a new integer to store this, a new variable to store this. So I'm going to say int my variable that equals this. Okay, so this is different. This is often how you'll see a return method called, because the returning item will come to this spot, and then my variable will get that value. Right? My variable will be the cup that stores whatever number comes back from this method. Okay? And now I can do whatever I want with it. I could add things to it with new variables. I can all kinds of different things I can do. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to print it just to kind of demonstrate the method working. So system.out.println. And here I can say the answer. Oh, let me put that in quotes. I'm going to say the answer is, and plus to concatenate this thing, my variable. Okay, so we're going to actually use this format a little bit throughout this video. So let's compile it. Good, no errors. And let's run this thing. Let's run it and see what we have here. So make sure the whole thing's compiled. Go to the math runner. Run that main method. And good. The answer is 5, just as we expected, right? So basic math in Java works as you might expect. It follows parentheses. One of the big things to note is that I cannot multiply without explicitly saying multiplication, right? So I could create a new, you should try and create a couple of new methods for fun on your own. I'm going to throw one in here real fast and not really talk about it too much because you should try it. Just play around again for yourself. This is just going to multiply 2 numbers together. Not much different than the other. Turn num1 times num2. Now what I'm saying here, what I was saying a moment ago, is I have to explicitly use the asterisk to say that I'm doing multiplication. I cannot just do this, right? In algebra, you can just put x and y next to each other and that implies multiplication. There's no implied multiplication in Java. And similarly with most other programming languages, actually. We have to be explicit about what operation we're doing. So I've created this method, and just to kind of demonstrate that idea that you have to have explicitness in that. I'm also going to create a method here. We're going to call this another int method. And I'm going to call this one divide. Okay, so obviously the goal of this is to divide. Okay. And again, I'm going to return num1 divided by num2. Okay. So we're just gonna return that division. Right? Compile, make sure we're good. Very nice. So now I can go back to my math runner and we can create some things that'll do some stuff on this. Let's see. You know what? We're gonna follow the style of what I did here, and I'm gonna copy and paste the system.out.line, and actually I'm gonna add something to this. You should if you know what that is. Right? So I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to use this multiple times. So now I'm going to set my variable. I'm going to change my variable, I should say, too, to calc object, and let's look at something that's really important with division. So divide, and I'm going to do, we know the expectation of what we're going to get when we do 4 divided by 2 or anything like that. So let's see what happens when I get 5 divided by 2. Right? So 5 divided by 2, I would expect to get 2.5. Right? So let's see if that happens. So I'm going to, again, paste that in. So right now what I'd encourage you to do is pause the video, try this out, see what happens, and then before you hit play again, think about what the result means. Okay, so what you'll notice here is I'm getting some sort of error here. And that's because I was rather silly in what I did. I'm not actually dividing there. I'm saying divide 5, 2. I need to send those numbers in. Sorry about that. So, okay, hopefully you found that error when you paused it, and then hopefully you also saw something else interesting happen. So let's get mine to run here and see what happens. Okay, so we got the answer is 5. That was from the adding that we did, and now the answer is 2. Well, we would have expected 2.5, so let's go back to Math Fun and think about this. We told Java that we were returning an int, right? So when this happened, we said num1 divided by num2, that is, the result is going to be an integer. But the result is actually a double. So the problem, we call this integer division. So when integer division happens, we're dividing 2 integers, and the result is expected to be an integer. So what happens is Java says, okay, well, then you don't care about the decimal, and it loses the precision. It drops off the 0.5 at the end, or whatever that decimal was, right? So it just drops off that decimal, and that's why we ended up getting 2. Java does not assume that you would like to round your integer. So there's some ways around this. You want to be kind of careful with what you think about when you calculate these things. So I'm going to change this to double here, and let's see what happens now if I change that to double. So now it's going to return a double. Compile. And let's run this thing. Oh, compile. And now it's got a problem because I had this say int here, so I'm going to change that to double as well. We found that. Compile. Okay, now we're good. Now I can do my runner. And again, we get 2. So we wonder to ourselves, what happened? How can we fix this? So I'm going to go back to Math Fun again. And what we need to do is it's doing this integer division because it's saying integer divided by an integer. We're going to get an integer. So I need to tell it, hey, look, this is a double. We're going to cast this as a double. Okay, so I'm going to compile. You're going to see it's going to be fine. We could also put the double in front of num2, but as long as one number is a double, it will work. And now let's see what we get. Oops, if I can click right. Let's compile and run that main method. And here we go. Now we finally got the 2.5 that we were expecting. So remember, this is integer division. One of the numbers has to be a decimal in order to actually get the decimal that we're expecting. Okay? That means I could do 5.0 divided by 2, or I could cast it the way that we did in this example. Lots of different ways to do it. But you just want to kind of watch out for that, because if you don't pay attention to it, it's easy to wonder why you are getting something that isn't quite the number you would expect. This ends up coming up quite a bit as we deal with integers throughout the course. So you want to watch out for that integer division and keep watching for that. So one of the next things, a good exercise to practice some of this, writing methods is an important key to what we do in Java. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to write a bunch of other methods, right? Write some other methods for practice, write some different things, see what they do. And later on, there'll be another video about general return methods as well, but writing methods is something you really can't get enough practice for.